Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Carl Samp. I'm at the Brainerd Lakes Area Community Foundation, part of the Community Giving Network of foundations. We're just going to wait a minute or two as people come into the room for the webinar. So I'll be right back with you. Okay, good afternoon. It looks like we have a pretty good share of the folks registered in the meeting right now, so welcome. My name is Carl Samp. I'm the Executive Director of the Brainerd Lakes Area Community Foundation, part of the Community Giving Network, and you'll hear from my peers from Alexandria, Wilmer, and the St. Cloud area today yet, in addition to our presenters. And we want to thank all our presenters for being here with us today, and thank all of you for joining us to hear about this important topic about equity and education. So we've been doing the Community Connections series since COVID-19 hit. We probably started in early April. We're somewhere in the 20s now as far as the number of webinars that we've done related both to COVID and also to equity. We started doing workshops regarding race and equity after the killing of George Floyd. So they're all available to watch at our website at www.communitygiving.com/CommunityConnections, and you can watch any of those there. Today, we'd like you to participate with us by asking questions using the question and answer tab at the bottom of your screen. So if you hover your mouse over near the bottom, you should pop up and see the options there, and Q&A will be one of those. So please enter questions that you might have in that tab, and then at the end of the session, Sarah Carlson will be facilitating the Q&A session. So with that, I'd like to turn it over to Carol Turno, Central Minnesota Community Foundation. Carol.
Thanks, Carl. I'm the Executive Director over at Central Minnesota Community Foundation and also a board member of Partners for Student Success. It is a collaborative effort around education to improve the experience for our students in the St. Cloud area. So we have a great panel. We have Amy Tromley, who is the Director of Partner for Student Success of Education, Pat Welter, who is the founder of the organization, as well as working for Morgan Family Foundation and a board member. Jason Harris is a principal of the school, and Corianne Carter serves as parent and equity navigator, but also a parent herself in the community. And then we have Mohayedin Mohammed, and he is president of the St. Cloud Islamic Center, and they're doing some very innovative things there as well. So I'll turn it over to Pat to get us started.
Thank you so much. As Carol said, I am the founder of Partner for Student Success, as well as being a member of the advisory committee and also a program officer for the Morgan Family Foundation. And that is the area that I want to speak about, because the foundation, Morgan Family Foundation, is one of the big partners of Partner for Student Success. And the issue that we deal with primarily in St. Cloud is social equity. And most of the grants that we give, the majority, are in the area of education. So our issue is listed on the screen. And the way we basically do that issue is by trying to eliminate unfair differences among groups and then advocate for changes that provide enhanced opportunities. Next slide, Amy. I want to give you a couple examples of the organizations that we grant to and in collaboration with Partner for Student Success. The first one is our Boys and Girls Club. And the particular education initiative that we have granted to is K through 12 career education. 95% of the kids in the Boys and Girls Clubs here in St. Cloud, we have 3 of them, are on free and reduced lunch, 86% of color. And many of the opportunities provided for middle class and upper class white kids are not available to these kids, especially related to career education. So this is a program that the Boys and Girls Club actually started and maintained during much of COVID. And they graduated their first 12th graders at the end of the summer this year. Another foundation that we support in the St. Cloud Schools District is the Santa Foundation, which provides Dreamline coaches. And what those coaches are primarily students of color who work with students of color in the school district. Right now, they're at our 2 middle schools and at McKinley, which is our alternative learning center. Because everyone is virtual right now, they are working with teachers, they're working with administrators, they're working with helping teachers to explore and connect with the kids, which is really important at this point in time. And the last thing I want to mention is how we collaborate with nonprofits in the community, how we collaborate with United Way partners, and then of course the school district. So I'm not going to steal Mohadim's thunder because he's also on the panel, but we have a grant with them around the achievement gap, which actually was supposed to start in the summer, but we couldn't at the time, but Mohadim has already started that. Interestingly enough, that project is primarily for English language students and using a curriculum that partners discovered at the school district, brought it to the Islamic Center and now helps to train and advocate for kids' literacy development in that area. All a work in progress, all this collaboration working through COVID, but you know what, it works, and it's wonderful to be working in this kind of a community. And now I'm going to turn it over to Amy Trombley.
Thank you, Pat. It was really an honor when Carol reached out to us and said, hey, we think you'd be a great fit for presenting. And as Carol and both Pat are board members, they know that we're a very data-driven organization at United Way Partner for Student Success. And so I'm going to go through some real quick slides just to show you what we know. We know that our students are struggling when it comes to equity. This graph right here shows that green bar is that all 5th grade reading student achievement is at. And then when we disaggregate that out, that orangish reddish bar is where our free and reduced lunch or our students living in poverty are at. That yellow bar is where our Black, African American of an enslaved descent are. And then our blue bar there is our Somali American students. And we can see just the huge disparities and inequities that we have in education for reading. And these trends continue in all sorts of places. We can look at the same inequities within our math programming. And then up comes along a pandemic and COVID. And what happens is we see those disparities become exacerbated, and the inequities within our systems become more and more challenged. On this slide, what we see here is where school closed last year and where students were at in their trajectory of learning to be on grade level. And when these school closures happened, students were at their March data point where they were supposed to be at. And now they haven't had that high quality education support that is traditional in a setting. Our teachers are working tirelessly hard, our parents are working hard, but we know that there are gaps, and we know that there will be these gaps for some time if we don't take action and collective action together. And we see those same trajectories in math, where they may have been going for a 3-month slide, which is typical, but we see with students, we are now seeing a 6-month slide plus the additional struggles that come along with distance learning. When we look at how people rated distance learning, we also see some great inequities. This is from the Minnesota Department of Education. And we see just the different demographic groups and their experiences with district learning. Many of us on the call probably know how challenging distance learning has been, regardless of where we sit. And we can see that also in the data as well. And when we go in deeper, and there are so many different ways that they stratified the data, but this is just one example of students who had an adult to support them at home. Or a student who had adult support to support them through their distance learning. And again, we see those inequities that provide additional challenges as we go through that. But not only academically is it important for these education gaps that we look at, but we also look at the essential social emotional needs of our kids. And we have seen that just so importantly rise to the level of dire need to support our kids. Prior to the pandemic, there is a survey called the Minnesota State Student Survey that students take, and we find out all sorts of things about them, risk behaviors, positive things, etc. And what we see is consistent trends of gaps that are created, and I like to call them delivery gaps. We've heard of opportunity gaps or academic gaps, but I like to think about them as delivery gaps. What are we doing, and how can we better deliver to shrink these gaps down? Looking at this, we can see that there is a gap between positive experiences for kids after school. We can also see the differences that kids feel in school, if they're feeling supported or not. And we can also see a difference in their grades. So we know all of this. We have all of this information, and it comes down to what are we doing about it? And so we have some great partners that have already been introduced to talk about what are some of the things that our community is doing about these disparities. And I really will love to welcome Jason Harris, principal from Tech High School.
Good afternoon. First, thanks for having me to be a part of this conversation, because I think in this day and time it's critical for our students and our families around equity in education. And looking at the data, I think Amy shared it. I just collected data myself. From the fall into now, families feel we're doing a better job than we were doing in the spring, because we had a time to learn and see what we needed to do. But we still see an equity gap within our student groups and our families. And how do we support them through this time of crisis and a pandemic? And some of the things from the school aspects is talking to students around that social emotional health, right? If I'm used to going to school every day, now I'm at home and my life might be in turmoil. How do we support them through connections, through relationships, through mentors? And then with our teachers in a whole new delivery model of distance learning and a digital way of delivering information, finding what works best for kids. We had gaps before COVID, and now they're just exacerbated with the distance learning. And we've been really trying to find ways to keep kids engaged socio-emotionally. We found some good things around relationships and mentor programming. First, making sure kids have a device and they have Wi-Fi to connect to the learning environments. Our school district's really done a good job of identifying families that might need hotspots or to help them be able to connect to the platforms. How do we support kids academically? Really working with teachers to find ways to offer extra support before or after students are in the models, and then what kind of after school programming can we offer? Not so much just academics, but enrichment, where we still find ways to find students' interests and then really start to build from that on the strength-based model of saying, hey, all right, Amy likes to, she likes art. Let's plug her into an art club where she can really engage in being with other students, talking, having a positive role model within that time to support her. And then what community supports can we offer? The school can't do it alone. We know community is powerful in how we can create a partnership and collaboration. If it's through meals, if it's through support and enrichment, academic, social, emotional, mental health. We know we have to have a strong partnership and to meet the needs of the students and families right now, because we're in crisis, we're in a pandemic, and we see families that are struggling, and just finding ways to really support them through this time is, and we want to get to each student and find out what their needs are and how we can support them and their families. Corey, I'll pass it over to Corey.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Harris. You pretty much covered a lot of the things that I was going to discuss. But as a parent, I think race equity is very important for our educators and teachers, because I want to feel like, and I hope my kid would feel like, that they have the same opportunities as every other child attending a school. And then also, I think it's important that staff understand that all kids do not learn the same and all children are different. So giving that support to the child based on their needs. Also, I feel like the school can better support our kids by giving them a wraparound service. So anything that they needed in a home, the school come together as a whole and support those children, even if that's like counseling, food support, or tutoring support. So that's when the partnerships that we have with different people in our community would play a major role. I feel like when we address the issue of poverty, students could potentially have a better chance of succeeding in school. I think it's really important for us to have teachers of color in our school district, because when our children look at the people in our building, it's like they don't see anybody representing them. So it's really hard for them to see themselves in that position where they don't even see it in a place that they are spending most of their time. COVID has truly impacted our schools and our families of color a lot. I mean, in so many ways, like we don't have reliable childcare. A lot of our families are struggling really bad with trying to figure out how to work, and also trying to figure out how to be a teacher, especially if they have multiple children in a home. They are not being successful. And speaking as a parent, when you haven't been to school for a long time, it's really hard trying to guide your student or help your child at home when you don't even know the work that your kids are supposed to be doing. So I think that's a struggle. But on a positive note, COVID has helped us come closer as families, I feel. It did allow us as parents to sit with our children and see what the teacher has possibly told us about, or what the teachers have to deal with our kids, and see where our children are struggling at. So I do feel like we have gained a lot of positive things from COVID, but also it has been a real struggle for some of our families in the community. And I think it goes to, how do I say? Mr. Muhammad, I'll pass it over to you.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Mohideen Mohammed. I'm the president of Islamic Center of St. Cloud. Islamic Center, those of you who may not know more about Islamic Center is a 501c nonprofit faith-based organization. Well, we do serve Muslim community in Central Minnesota. Islamic Center have been incorporated since 1996, so we've been serving for 24 years in Central Minnesota. We do not only the religious and services, but we also offer a lot of other services, include the academic educational programs. And I would like to talk a little bit more about that. We have redesigned our program in terms of the academic support. I've been working with the kids. You know, we have a lot of kids comes to our for mosque, for, you know, Saturday, Sunday school, more than 2,000 kids. So I've been working with these kids for a very long time now, but I've seen a lot of them struggling in academic programs, in academically. So we do have a educational program which is more designed Saturday, Sunday for its religious and Arabic languages. So we do K to 12, but I've seen a lot of young kids who were born in St. Cloud who came through our programs, who have been really picking up learning Arabic quicker than the academic English. So I've been wondering for a while about the deficiency and the differences and all of that. But I think we decided to do something about at least addressing those gaps. And for those kids who we have in our center, also participate in national competitions when it comes to Islamic State Quran competition. And Minnesota is one of the top achieving, in those competitions. But when it comes to academic, they're really performing very low. So we have a very bright kids who have done very well in different ways, but are still struggling in school. So we came up with different scenarios, but we have started after school program, which more addressing those educational gaps. And the Improve Achievement Project, which we collaborate with some partners funded by Morgan Family Foundation and Central United Way, Central Minnesota United Way. We have two groups that have started this year and who have really started very strong. And we're hoping that at the end of school year, we will have a very great report for their achievement. And I'm really, so far, surprised me is their achievement. Even though they do an online project, but these project programs are specifically designed to build their skills, not only their grade level, but they can go beyond their grade level. So with all the assessment we have made so far with those couple of months, it's been really very positive. Comes to the school year, they will achieve a couple of grades above their grade level. So that's very positive. And we also appreciate the Morgan Family Foundation support and United Way support for those programs. Without them, we haven't done anything about this project. Pat and Amy have been very, very instrumental working with us in terms of those projects. We're also working on another project which will be focusing on 6th grade to 12th grader, which we call a Graduate St. Cloud project. And it's more designed for to prepare students for college, career, jobs, and been working with Career Solutions, Central Community Empowerment, and Grassroots as well. But we are also expecting that project would be successful. But so far, with the project we've been doing and working with these kids have been real successful. We're also working with the District 742 and some other local organizations to provide educational support hub for our buildings in the community to support families, students, and staff in the distance learning. So for that, we needed to increase the internet access in our building. We're in an old building. We have a very big building, but it's very old. So accessibility, internet accessibility is kind of challenge. So we're working with Pat to increase the internet accessibility from like 50 students to like 300 students with a high-speed internet so they can access that, in our building. And we can also support staff who are coming from St. Cloud District 742 who will be hosted in our building for tech support and working with those students. So we again, I thank Pat and family, Morgan Family Foundation for their support for that. Internet access is very crucial when it comes to supporting those students who are doing distant learning, and family who have been really struggling with their kids, especially when it comes to distance learning. We have a very large families, single mother families who have 5, 6, 7 children, who sometimes not only she cannot support, but internet accessibility and tech support is very challenging. On the top of that, they have a language barriers as well. So we wanted to provide those families a space in our center so they can bring their kids in a small number with the social distancing, all that health guidelines. We are hopeful that we can provide a great support for those students who are really struggling and families who need that support to at least catch up or continue working with the kids online on distance learning. So I'll end with that. I think it was 3 minutes. I don't know if I passed those 3 minutes, but if you have any question, you're welcome. Thank you.
And we just want to thank all of our community partners for the work that they're doing. Obviously, you can see there's some great, very focused initiatives based on the data and the disparities that we see, that we're trying to be strategic and meeting the needs where they're needed the most. So that's our presentation. We're excited to answer questions throughout, and we will pass it on.
Well, thank you to all of our panelists who have been able to speak with us so far about a K-12 sort of lens. We are going to shift our thinking now. I'm Sarah Carlson. I'm the Executive Director of our Willmar Area Community Foundation, and I am excited to welcome Stacey Griffin, who is from Ridgewater College here in both Willmar and in Hutchinson. Stacey is our Director of Equity, Inclusion, and Student Success, and she has worked in education, higher ed in particular, for the last 15 years, both at St. Cloud Technical and Community College and St. Cloud State prior to arriving with us here at Ridgewater. And her bachelor's degree is in Spanish from St. Cloud State and a master's in academic advising from K-State University. So Stacy.
Thank you so much for the introduction, Sarah. As Sarah mentioned, my name is Stacey Griffin. I'm the Director of Equity, Inclusion, and Student Success, and I'm the Diversity Officer at Ridgewater College. I started last December, and then COVID hit in March. So I've been immersed in all things COVID over the past several months, like everyone else. As Sarah mentioned, I've been in higher education for about 14, 15 years at St. Cloud Technical and Community College, St. Cloud State, in various offices such as advising, registration, and admission. So thank you so much for welcoming me here today. Next slide, please. So as Sarah mentioned, I'll be talking about diversity, equity, and inclusion with a higher education lens, specifically what Minnesota State is doing right now related to Equity 2030, what Ridgewater College is doing related to diversity, equity, inclusion, where are the challenges and what is going well. Next slide, please. So as many of you know, Minnesota State is made up of 30 colleges, 7 universities, and 54 total campuses. We serve over 340,000 students each year. We serve more students of color and American Indian students than any other higher education providers in Minnesota combined. Next slide, please. So the first thing I'm going to talk about is Equity 2030. And Equity 2030 is the Minnesota State initiative that was set forth by Chancellor Malhotra with the goal of eliminating the equity gap by the year 2030, with a specific focus on racial, socioeconomic, and first-generation status inequities. The System Office has been looking at strategies and initiatives to closing the educational equity gaps at all Minnesota State colleges and universities. The one thing that Dr. Malhotra points out that I'm particularly drawn to is that he points out that the colleges and universities can't do this work alone. It's going to require strong partnerships with K-12, state agencies, the governor's office, legislators, and business and industry. He goes on to say that if we could have, in isolation, removed the barriers that sustain equity gaps, it would have been accomplished by now. So that's just an important thing to remember, as it takes all of us working together to close the equity gap. Next slide, please. So one of the strategies that Minnesota State is undertaking this year is called Equity by Design. All Minnesota State institutions are partnering with this, and each college and university has a team that's made up of faculty, staff, and students that are engaging in this process. This team is going to be looking at data in gateway courses to identify where the equity gaps exist. So in the past, often we haven't disaggregated the data, and this year is something that we're going to be doing, is disaggregating the data to look specifically where there's opportunities and where those equity gaps exist. So gateway courses are those courses that often prevent students from progressing within their program. So that includes courses like math and English and developmental education and so on. So these gateway courses will prevent students not only not being successful, but will prevent them from graduating at Ridgewater if they don't pass through those gateway courses. So once these equity gaps are identified, Ridgewater and many of the other Minnesota State institutions will be implementing different initiatives to address these gaps. So some of the initiatives that they may be looking at are like specialized tutoring, different bridge programs, and so on. And really, the Equity by Design's focus is changing the mindset from looking for college-ready students and being a student-ready college. So it's flipping that mindset as well. Next slide, please. So just a little bit of information from Ridgewater. We have 2 different campuses, one in Wilmer. This data is a little bit old, it's from 2018, but at that time we had about 2,800 students in Wilmer and about 2,000 students in Hutchinson. And as you can see from the graph here, it just kind of shares our demographic information. So as you can see, the second column here is Pell eligible students. So those are the students with lower socioeconomic status. We have about 40% Pell eligible students, about 18% students of color, and 20% first generation students. So there's students where their parents never attended college. And those are really the 3 areas that are in focus with Equity 2030. And those are the areas we're going to be focusing our initiatives on. Okay, next slide, please. All right, so first, some of the challenges. Like many of us have already talked about, COVID-19 has been a huge challenge, in K-12, but also within higher education. This semester, one of the things we started doing when students are withdrawing from classes, we were requiring them to talk to a counselor first, so we could, talk about, what resources may be available to help them to succeed, but also just to kind of learn what are students experiencing and why are they withdrawing from classes. So not really a surprise, but many of the reasons that students are withdrawing are either directly or indirectly related to COVID. Students are having to work more while doing distance learning with their kids, and they're just completely overwhelmed with everything that's going on. So in spring and summer semester, our college moved completely all of our classes online. So it was a really quick transition for students. And then during this fall semester right now, most of our students are online. There are a few programs that are face-to-face, but the vast majority of students are learning online. So of course, technology access is a concern. We are trying to be very intentional about asking students during their first advising appointment questions related to technology, if they have access to technology other than their phone, to be able to access their classes. Do they have a laptop? Do they have a webcam? How is their internet? We're finding that there's a lot of spotty internet in various places around our community. So if the answer is no, Ridgewater has been working with these students in various ways to access technology. We've been renting out or sharing laptops and webcams and hotspots to try to make sure that everyone has equal access to technology. We know we're not catching everyone and students may be falling through the cracks with this, but we are absolutely trying to do our best to ensure that students have access to technology. Learning style. So we are hearing from many students that are withdrawing that that online learning style just is not a good match for them, that they are hands-on learners, and it makes it particularly challenging when all of their classes are online, or the majority of their classes are online, and along with the support services too. Mostly all of the support services are available online. Basic needs being met. You know, students, it's not anything new, but students have housing insecurities, or students have food insecurities, and the pandemic has made it worse. So we're trying to meet those needs and connecting students to resources in that way as well. And then, of course, the connection to campus and other students. That's really an important part of retention and the sense of belonging that students have. So you may have heard we are not having any athletics for this academic year, and then no student life activities in person for the year as well. So we know that the sense of belonging is so incredibly important, especially as we talk about student success and retention. So as you can see, COVID has put into place additional barriers for our students that we are working hard to address at Ridgewater College. Next slide, please. So one of the first things that happened when I started at Ridgewater is I worked with our president, Dr. Craig Johnson, in developing an equity plan for 2020-2021. Some of the initiatives that we had written into the plan at that time were are helping with some of the immediate issues that we're facing with COVID-19, but will also support some of the longer term equity plans that we're working towards. The first thing that we are working on that we've already developed is we have DEI councils, diversity, equity, and inclusion councils on both campuses. Previously, we only had a council on the Wilmer campus, and we've expanded now to have one separately on the Hutchinson campus, just recognizing that the two campuses are very different and the communities have very different needs. Along with the DEI councils, we are also having an intentional effort to engage community and business members within the councils. Again, just keeping in mind that Equity 2030 and that we need these partnerships to be able to move the dial with equity and inclusion issues. The next thing that we're working on that we just started this fall semester is a proactive or an intrusive advising approach with special populations. So this is basically an advising approach in which the focus is to build connections with students and to identify possible barriers or concerns before they occur. You know, we don't want to learn about this when the student is already enrolled and they're taking classes, and then we find out, you know, months down the line that they don't have access to technology, or they do have food insecurities. So this year we sent out, some of the things that we're doing is we're really trying to build that connection with students and trying to communicate with them more often. One of the things that we did was we sent out planners to this population of students and worked with students on entering important dates from their syllabi into the planners, so related to time management. We also worked on goal setting pieces and then assisted students one-on-one with financial aid and scholarship applications. We also are in the process of reviewing policy with an equity lens. So we recognize that one of the biggest impacts that we can have related to diversity, equity, and inclusion issues is through policy. So during the summer is when we started, but we started reviewing all policy, both new and existing, with an equity lens, and we're taking it through the proper channels to kind of review and get the changes approved. So we hope to have all of the policy reviewed by the end of the academic year. And then finally, this is something that we just implemented literally last week. And I think this is a good example of something that will help us long-term, but will especially help us now as it relates to the challenges we've been facing with COVID. So this is basically a form that's going to be used with all new students to learn more about the student and to try to address some of those needs that I was talking about: access to technology, housing and food insecurities, and general financial needs. So we've learned that sometimes students don't always feel comfortable verbalizing these barriers or concerns. So we thought that a form might be more helpful so that students can fill it out and that before their first meeting with an advisor, and then the advisor will review it before the first meeting, and then they can address those needs in that first meeting and connect students to resources, hopefully again before the semester starts, and we can get that addressed at that time. So these are some of the items that have been written into the equity plan and we are formally doing. But in general, we just have been doing a lot of listening over the past year, just to learn from our students and to identify where the needs are in order to support support students and their success. So I am happy to answer any questions that you all have.
Well, thank you, Stacy. We appreciate what you've shared as well. And now we are to the point in our conversation where we are open for general Q&A, and I appreciate those folks who have put questions into the chat box. So I'll do my best to get all of those accomplished. But the first question that was put into the chat feature is for Pat. And Dr. Welter, I'm wondering if you could share a little bit about the Innocent Classroom Project and its impact for us, please.
The Innocent Classroom Project is a project that we discovered, wonderfully so. For those of you who don't know much about the Innocent Classroom Project, Alex Pate basically created this project, and it has to do with finding the good, the innocence in each student. And it's a way for teachers, primarily for teachers, to begin to deal with their own implicit bias and also with negative and internalized stereotypes that students have. So we piloted that in St. Cloud at Kennedy School, and actually it was a tremendous success. We had many teachers indicate that it really changed their view of looking at kids, of how they treat kids. It had implications in terms of behavior and academics. In addition, many of the administration was very pleased with the result. So I guess that would be it in a snapshot.
Thank you so much, Dr. Welter. We appreciate that. The next question is in our Q&A tab. And I think it would probably go best to Jason. So, and maybe a little bit to Stacy as well. Have there been any discussions with colleges who offer teaching degrees to include coursework on actual teaching remotely and online versus in person, where most of our teacher preparation programs focus at this point? I think we all know that online course teaching is very different than in person. Jason, I think you're muted.
Sorry about that. I think one of the things we learned in our spring around distance learning was what have colleges been doing with online learning, and kind of looking at some of the ways that colleges have already set stage on online learning and engagement for students. And we kind of looked at some of those models specifically with online learning to see what we were missing at high school level, and then kind of working through that with students in high school to prepare them for online learning. I think one thing, and Stacy could probably attest to this, right now in high school with this model of distance learning, and we had the hybrid for a bit this fall, was we're preparing kids for college in high school now, because that's the way students are learning, that I can learn online, I can go in person, I can go at my own pace. And so one of the things that we've been really having a discussion about right in front of our eyes, the pandemic is here, but it's really shifting the way K-12 has looked in the past of traditionally just showing up in a brick and mortar building. We now have found some things that we could do for students distance and in person, and trying to figure that out. And Stacy can probably talk more from the higher ed lens of that.
Yeah, thanks, Jason. So I guess what I will say is I don't think we have it I don't think anybody has it figured out right now related to distance learning and online learning. I know our faculty at Ridgewater have been asking for, can we get further training on how to engage students? And, you know, it's a completely different mode, as we all know. I know I preach into the choir here, but it's something that we all need to learn how to do better. And it's something that we're working on. I can say I don't know that it has been discussed at Ridgewater related to a course or curriculum related to online learning, but that is a fantastic idea that definitely should be brought forward. So great question.
Thank you both. The next question is in the chat feature, and it is to both Corey Ann. We'll start with Corey Ann, and then we'll go to Mohayedin. But the question is, what are you hearing are the biggest struggles for the families that you are working with right now? Corey Ann?
That's really a hard question to like narrow down because it's just so much going on. But I think the main struggle right now is our kids of color already struggled while they were in school, you know. They were having a hard time when they were in class and teachers were there to assist them. So our families are really concerned with them now being at-home learners and the teachers are not there to assist, and it's just for a brief period throughout the day that the teachers are available. So a lot of my families are just really concerned, and me as a parent myself, I mean, I have a second grader and I feel, is my son getting all the education that he needs right now? And I know the school district is doing the best that they can. So I completely understand that we are all in this together. So, but when he goes to third grade, is he going to be struggling because of the lack of education he got being home with me? So a lot of the parents are really concerned about when their child do return back to school, where their education level would be. Will it be on track? Will it be behind? And then also, I feel like we need to support families opposed to just a child, you know. We're all trying to figure out how to help a kid. How do we help this kid be successful? What do we need to do for this kid to be successful? But the children are home with us right now. So it's more so of what do we need to do to help this parent, to help this child be successful? Because if I'm not understanding the work, how can I help my child understand the work? And so that's like the main thing right now is just, where would our kids be when the pandemic gets to whatever norm it's going to be and our kids return to school? Will my child feel like he's in the right place once he returns? So that's just me and other parents' concerns.
Thank you, Corey Ann.
Yes, ma'am.
Mohayedin, is there anything you'd like to add to that? And then I have a follow-up question for you.
Most of the families that I work with, you know, ELL students, families. So a lot of moms, a lot of dads are worried about if the kids are really doing their work, you know, especially when they're doing the distance learning and they're at home, they're with the iPads and tablets and all of that. They don't know how to support while they don't understand the content and all of that. And the major worries, like, you know, they worry about finding their kids really not doing their work, you know, too late. You know, I saw a lot of them have some experience in last school year, at the end of school year, where they found out at the end of school year that the kids were not engaging, and that was too late. So they always, the question they always asking me is like, how do I know my kids are doing good, they're learning, they doing what they're supposed to do, as well as like they worry about their support, like while they can't support their kids, you know, they look in some other options to support their kids. And as a parent, they also worry about, like every other parents, the education of their kids. So mainly, you know, majority of them are really struggling online and distance learning options. So, and now we're going back to online, and that's going to complicate a little bit about the situation of those families.
Thank you very much. I appreciate that. There's a question that is intriguing in the chat box, and it's about programs and efforts that might be in place to support students of color pursuing internships and job experiences. And I'm going to see what Stacy can shed some light on that, and then maybe pop back to Mohayedin to see what he might be experiencing as they're working with older students. Stacy, what are you guys running into?
So it's not in place yet, but one of the things that we're exploring at Ridgewater College is a partnership regarding students of color in education. So bringing more educators on board from the students of color, but it's not in place at this time. I know our Dean of Liberal Arts and Sciences is exploring this as an option, and I'm really excited about this opportunity, but I'm not familiar with any other internship opportunities specific to that at this time.
Thank you, Stacy. Mohayedin, are you seeing anything with the older students?
We've seen a lot of students who are really graduating from college who don't have any experience, and they finish in their major, and it's been very hard for them to get internship as well as get a job. So we've seen a lot of students, and this is one of the issues we have in St. Cloud area, is that you know, a lot of students are graduating without experience, and now they don't have a connection and in the workforce in our area, and now they move into Twin Cities because they have some friends, some kind of support that they can easily access some internship or some kind of support. So we're losing a lot of talents that we really need here in St. Cloud area, and that's been really been going on for a while, and that's something we need to do or make some change, working with the St. Cloud State or St. Cloud Technical College, finding some solution for that, because in that way, we're really losing talents. We're educating them, we invest in them, and now at the end of the time they can get back to the community, they are moving out from St. Cloud area. So that's been really a worry for us for a while now.
Thank you. That certainly seems like an area where some community-based thinking might be helpful to our education and community partners. So I'm wondering about this question for both Amy and Jason, and it's regarding, I'm not sure that looking forward to seeing the MCA test results is ever necessarily on an educator's top 10 list, but particularly during this time, what do you think that the data on the MCAs will tell us about student learning? Amy, do you want to start?
Sure. One of my colleagues would say that it's like a holiday for me when they're releasing different assessment results. And that said, assessments are only as strong as the way we utilize them and the importance of them. And so the first piece to ask is, they didn't do statewide assessments last year. There's still question if they'll even be able to administer them this year based on security that goes around with assessments and where students will be at a location. So there's some question around it. And then the other piece is really taking into consideration the necessity for it. With all the social emotional needs, all the academic needs, is there that essential need to do a statewide administrated test? And there are answers on both sides. I mean, for us to look at a statewide level as to where those gaps are because of COVID-19, there's some definite realities as to why you would want to administer those assessments, to then adjust and look at how do we better meet the needs of students and adjust our curriculum for that matter. My second grader, well, my third grader now, really stopped school mid-March in second grade. And so she started really as a second grader in her 6th month of school as a third grader. So should we have those same types of third grade standards, expectations for those kids who didn't have that experience and now are having to learn digitally? I'm a big proponent of we teach kids, not standards, and we really need to be very aware of that. I know our districts are doing great things with localized assessments, so they're able to look at, how are kids doing on their multiplication tests, or how are kids doing on their reading fluency, some real-time assessments that can have some real impact on supporting learning gaps. And I'll pass it over to you, Jason.
Jason, you are muted.
Sorry about that. I think the MCA test is just one snapshot of student learning. Typically, kids of color don't do well on the MCA test anyway. So localized communities and schools, we look at benchmark testing. So right now in St. Cloud, we use the STAR test and reading and math to see where kids are around their learning. And we know if kids are at average or above average growth towards those benchmarks, they're going to do well on the MCAs. And just within our school system, we just did fall benchmarking. And I was actually surprised to see not more learning loss right now. So at Tech High School, 9th and 10th graders in the high school model do a growth benchmark test called the STAR. And over 50% of the students were average or above average in math. So our teachers are doing something well, even with that time off. Right now, we looked at reading and it was somewhere around 44% average or above average growth. And those growth benchmarks are aligned to the standards. So not so much learning loss of what we were expecting in 9th and 10th grade, but I think, like I said before, the proficiency in MCA is one snapshot. I think Amy hit it a little bit. When we look at the standards that are aligned in the testing and MCAs, you can find out what gaps students aren't doing well in. So it will be a good gauge, but just having the test for us, the growth benchmark, test for the STAR was a good indicator of where our kids are. And I think in 742, it's a good gauge of being off since May. I think our last test was, the STAR test was in the winter. So nothing in the spring, and over the summers, you see learning loss at high levels. But I was actually surprised that our students were over 55. It was about 55% average or above in math and 44 in reading. So I think we're looking at that data, seeing what standards kids aren't doing well in and what gaps that we can work with teachers to really deliver effective instruction.
Well, thank you, panelists. This has been an enlightening conversation, and certainly lots of spaces that community members can engage with our education folks to think about those hard spaces that kids and families are in right now, both from an equity lens, but also due to COVID-19. I'm going to turn it over to my colleague, Holly Witt with the Alexandria Area Community Foundation for some final thoughts. Holly?
Great. Thanks, Sarah. And I'd just like to thank all of our panelists today with the Partners for Student Success and for Stacy with Ridgewater. Thank you so much for sharing with us today. You know, one of the things I really heard loud and clear is that, you know, we're certainly challenged right now due to the pandemic, but it's just exacerbated equity in our education system. So thank you for being on the front lines and for doing all that you do. Also, I'd like to thank all the people who attended today. We appreciate you coming and tuning in. Just as a way of information, if you are interested, we have been doing webinars since April. And all of our webinars were taped and are available if you go to communitygiving.org and go to events. And you can go in there and you're able to go in and access all of our previous webinars. We've actually had 20. And probably the last, I don't know, number 6, 7 have been around just equity. And since the death of George Floyd, we've really tried to focus on that topic. But we go back 20 sessions. We've done them almost weekly. So there's a variety of webinars for you to tune in there. Also, just an update on our response funds from our partner foundations. Just if you are interested in learning a little bit more, we're transitioning right now from response into a response and recovery mode. So all of us are at different points in the process there. Go to your executive director in the area where you live, or go to our website and you can check out just our dates, timelines, information on those grants, where they're at and how you can apply. I just want to mention a couple other quick things. Our next webinar will be Equity in Banking. That will be November 17th. And then we do have a professional advisor webinar on December 8th on year-end giving strategies. So I think with that, we're about out of time. We just want to thank you all for attending. Thanks for participating, and we look forward to seeing you next time. Thanks and have a great day.